Welcome to Calm, Sleepy Tales, and tonight's story, The Friday That Went a Bit Blue, and Not Just the Cheese. A cosy, whimsical tale centering around the Curds and Quill's weekly Mystery Bite Challenge, where something curious occurs. Not so much a crime, but a culinary conundrum. When a mysterious wedge of cheese that shouldn't exist appears on the tasting tray, Quentin and Coralie must uncover how it arrived. We'll plunge into the afternoon intrigue, where poetry appears on jam jar labels, a wedge of cheese goes wandering, and the Friday Mystery Bite Challenge tumbles towards an unexpected encore. We then move on to the after-hours soiree of stories and censors, where thunderous boots tap rhythms, a cloak reveals hidden embroidery, and the final ingredient of the cheese at last declares itself. The morning after the storm reveals lingering magic, seed cakes that hum lullabies, boots that sigh with contentment, and a surprise delivery waiting on the Curds and Quill doorstep. First, let's begin by letting go of the day and enjoy this moment of stillness. Find a comfortable position, let your head rest, and close your eyes. Take a slow, deep breath in and gently exhale. With each breath, imagine the air around you becoming softer, warmer, more peaceful. As you breathe, feel the tension in your jaw, your forehead, and your back begin to melt away. Let your hands rest. Let your feet soften. Feel your body begin to relax. Your shoulders, your arms, your legs, slowly becoming heavier, as if they're sinking gently into the bed beneath you. Imagine the worries of the day slowly dissolving, like mist in the morning sunlight, drifting away, leaving only peace behind. You are safe. You are warm. You are exactly where you need to be. Let yourself surrender to this comfort. And when you're ready, we'll begin tonight's story. By 10:30 on any given Friday, the lane outside Curds and Quill smells like an argument between caramelised onions and summer rain. Intense, oddly comforting, and certain to make you hungry, even if you've only just finished second breakfast. Inside, Mr. Quentin Quill stood poised behind his marble tasting counter, like a ringmaster in corduroy. He polished a wedge of elderflower Havarti with a velvet cloth, humming Byron's "She Walks in Beauty" under his breath. Tiny clouds of flour, left over from labelling serving suggestion for the soul cards, hovered about his moustache, giving him the air of a dishevelled sugar plum. His partner in preserved perfection, Mrs. Coralie Finch, moved between copper jam pots and pickling crocks with the unhurried grace of a swan that kept its engine room well hidden. When the shop bell chimed, she didn't flinch. She simply turned, apron twirling, and smiled at the first customer of the day. "Morning, Tobias," she greeted the postman, whose satchel bulged suspiciously. "Delivery for you, Mrs. Finch," he puffed, producing a parcel the size of a hedgehog, wrapped in brown paper and string. Quentin's glasses slid down his nose. "That," he declared, "is precisely the shape of a cheese that thinks too highly of itself." Tobias winked. "Wouldn't know, sir. Smells of thunder and picnic rugs, though." "Roquefort?" Coralie suggested. "Or rebellion," Quentin murmured. They set the package on the counter. Written in green ink, "For Friday's mystery bite, handle gently." Coralie arched an eyebrow. "I didn't order anything this week." Quentin stroked his bow tie pickles. "Nor did I." "Intriguing." By 11:30, the queue had begun its gentle curl down the lane. Widdersham folk adore a ritual, and the Mystery Bite Challenge had become as sacred as the ever-ticking clock tower's noon chime. First to enter was Mabel Thistle from Thistle and Crumb. Flour dusted her auburn curls. She carried a tin of honey oat biscuits, still warm from the oven. "Thought these might pair with whatever you're serving," she said, sliding the tin towards Coralie. "Payment in crumbs acceptable?" "Always," Coralie replied, inhaling the biscuit steam like it carried gossip. Hot on Mabel's heels came Merrin Hemslow of Tog and Hem, wearing an indigo cloak shot through with silver thread. It fluttered dramatically, even without wind. Typical. She removed a folded square of fabric from her satchel and placed it on the counter. "A napkin," she explained, "for the poetry prize. No parchment deserves to travel alone." The next arrival was a quiet footstep rather than a jingle. Fenwick Tole from Heel and Hide Cobblers, broad-shouldered, leather-smelling, eyes as grey-green as a mossy stone. He removed his battered cap and nodded toward the wrapped parcel on the counter. "Heard it breathing from across the street," he said. Quentin's moustache quivered with delight. "Then let us discover its voice." At precisely noon, Quentin rang the brass bell made from repurposed cowbells and silver spoons. "Friends, patrons, fearless nibblers," he proclaimed, "today's challenge is a gift. From whom? We know not. For why? We shall learn. Identify 3 key ingredients and claim your reward: a wedge of your choosing and a freshly penned stanza, courtesy of my humble hand." Coralie sliced the mystery wheel in one clean motion. A waft of fragrance, blue cheese, smoked walnut, and something faintly stormy rolled through the shop. The crowd murmured like distant surf. Quentin placed toothpick-speared morsels onto a slate plate and set it on the counter. Mabel, Merrin, Fenwick, and a handful of regulars leaned in, eyes shining. "One nibble per soul," Coralie reminded them, ladling tiny portions of pickled pear onto side saucers. Hazel Nibbin from Nettle and Nib popped in just then, raincoat flapping, to deliver a basket of sun-sweetened tomatoes labelled "for courage." She accepted her complimentary cube of cheese, took a thoughtful bite, and hummed. "Tastes like secrets," she said, slipping a lucky pear into Mabel's coat pocket on her way out. Merrin chewed in contemplative silence. Fenwick merely closed his eyes, cataloguing notes like footfalls on cobble. Mabel's biscuit-brown cheeks flushed pink. "Tang of lightning," she blurted. "And is that elderflower?" Quentin scribbled guesses onto a chalkboard. "Elderflower. Thunder? Walnuts?" Coralie laughed softly. "Thunder isn't an ingredient, dear heart." "It is if you whisk it right," Quentin countered. Just then the cheese rind shimmered, a barely there flicker of blue light along the edge. Fenwick set down his toothpick. "Saw a boot print like that glow once," he said. "Moonlit fair." The room went still. All heads turned as the shop bell tinkled and an unfamiliar figure stepped through. A tall woman in a rain-speckled cloak, the colour of midnight. Her boots, Fenwick noted, left no damp mark on the floor. She lifted her hood, revealing silver-streaked hair and eyes like storm clouds. Under one arm, she carried a violin case. "Pardon," she said in low voice. "Is the challenge still open?" Quentin bowed. "For brave palates, always." She tasted. She smiled. Cave-aged blue, honeyed walnut, and a wild nightshade blossom. She set a small ticket stub on the counter. "Thank you for the tune." Quentin blinked. "Madam, you are—" He searched for the phrase. "Uncannily correct." The woman inclined her head. "Then the poetry slice, if you will." Coralie fetched a parchment wedge already waiting, ink still drying. The stranger tucked it into her violin case, nodded to Fenwick, "Your boots keep secrets well, cobbler," and dissolved into the drizzle before anyone asked her name. Quentin exhaled. "Well, the bar has been set rather high." Merrin leaned over the cheese wheel, her cloak seeming to breathe. "Nightshade blossom. That's rare. Dangerous in unskilled hands." Coralie's brow furrowed. "Yet balanced here. Someone knows their alchemy." Fenwick flexed his stained fingers. "And their stories. Those blossoms bloom under storm and moon. Mabel passed around biscuits to steady nerves. Perhaps, she suggested, the cheese came from whoever wrote the Storywalk tale this year. Secret authors love midnight snacks. Quentin tapped the chalkboard. Question of the day. Who delivered our mysterious wheel? The door creaked. Wind braided with rain whispered through. But outside, nothing except cobblestones, dark with drizzle, and a single violet blossom lying where the stranger had stood. Coralie picked it up gently. Someone, she murmured, has begun a new verse, and we've been invited to listen. The drizzle swelled into a steady shower that pattered on Curds and Quill's diamond-paned windows, like fingers drumming impatiently for the next chapter. Inside, tension smelled faintly of smoked walnut and damp wool. Quentin turned the mystery wheel so its glowing rind faced the back wall, as though embarrassed by its own celebrity. Then he scurried to the poetry desk, an old lectern cluttered with quills and parchment, muttering iambs about storm-kissed cultures and moonlit maturation. Coralie, meanwhile, took up her calligraphy pen and began rewriting the cheese labels for the display case. On impulse, she added a new stanza in emerald ink. When thunder blooms inside a rind, and nightshade hums in brine, remember, even hidden things are meant for tongues and time. She slipped the card before a stack of citrus-scented kafili and moved on. At the front, Merrin Hemslow dusted biscuit crumbs from her indigo cloak and inspected the violet blossom left by the stranger. Storm violet, she pronounced. Rare. Grows near river bends, where lightning struck the year before. Fenwick raised an eyebrow. How do you stitch that into a cloak? Merrin's smile was small and secret. You'd be surprised what fabric will sing about if you give it enough thunder. Mabel Thistle, ever pragmatic, tied an apron over her dress, though she was not in her bakery, and opened her tin of honey oat biscuits. Rain always makes folk hungry, she said, planting the tin on the tasting counter. Let's be polite hosts, even if the cheese isn't. Coralie set out tiny porcelain plates shaped like quills and ladled amber pickled pear compote onto each. Mystery or not, Friday's still Friday. Quentin brightened, glasses fogging with purpose. Precisely. The show must nibble on. Gather, friends. Let us taste the rest of the board. Hazel Nibbin burst back through the door, water dripping from her newsboy cap. Sold out of tomatoes early, she announced. But the apples staged a coup. Also, someone's left this note under Wellington the sheep. She handed Coralie a folded paper smelling faintly of mint. Coralie opened it. 5 words, neat copper plate. The third ingredient is story. Hazel whistled. Well, that explains absolutely nothing. At that moment, a gasp rippled across the room. The glowing wheel of blue cheese, previously sulking on the back table, was gone. Merrin's cloak flared as she pivoted. Who moved it? Quentin spluttered. I have not relocated so much as a crumb. Fenwick strode to the door, stooped and touched the floorboards. Damp prints, he murmured. Size 6, maybe 7. Light tread, heading out the rear. Mabel peered into the prep alcove. The tiny back door, usually locked, stood ajar. Quentin clutched his mustard waistcoat. Our wheel has rolled. Coralie kept the shop running. She refused to close on a Friday afternoon. But Merrin, Fenwick, and Hazel grabbed cloaks and followed the damp footprints into the alley behind Curds and Quill. Rain hissed off rooftops. The scent of yeast, chimney smoke, and wet hops drifted from Thistle and Crumb down the lane. The trail of glowing crumbs, for the cheese apparently shed faint sparks when jostled, led past the smithy, across Thimble Alley, where the cobblestones rustled, left, and into Widdersham's tiny riverside park. There, under a sycamore tree, stood Blythe Larkspur, the town composer, clutching a violin and the glowing wedge in wax paper. Blythe's eyes went wide as the trio approached. Wait, let me explain. Merrin raised a palm. Borrowing is fine. Borrowing without asking is sticky, like jam, but less delicious. Hazel sighed. Blythe, dear, you can't just run off with magical cheese. It's not brie on layaway. Blythe held out the cheese. I heard the rind hum a perfect E-flat. It completed my overture. She blushed. I didn't mean to steal, only to listen. The wheel started humming when the stranger played her violin outside. Fenwick's gaze sharpened. Stranger? She busked by the clock tower last night, Blythe explained. Moonlight sonata, but slower, like rain on vellum. Merrin's cloak rustled, silver thread catching stray lamplight. A travelling musician, or returning? Didn't say. Left at dawn. Blythe bit her lip. Left that cheese on my doorstep with a note. For the composer who hears weather in wood. I thought it was a gift. Hazel jabbed a finger upward. But the parcel is addressed Curds and Quill. Blythe paled. Oh. Fenwick's voice was gentle. Come, return the wedge. We'll ask no coppers, only questions. She nodded, tucking her violin beneath her cloak. Together they hurried back through the drizzle, each pondering the phrase, story as ingredient. Back at Curds and Quill, customers forged on with the mystery bite, now speculating wildly. Marjoram, Starlight, Aged goat regrets, while Quentin scribbled faster than a frantic quill in a gale. Coralie's intuitive pairings had coaxed smiles, tears, and one spontaneous marriage proposal, declined politely. When Fenwick, Merrin, Hazel, and Blythe returned, cheese safely in hand, Quentin exhorted, "Did you capture the culprit?" "Composer, not culprit," Merrin corrected, guiding Blythe forward. She thought it was a gift. Blythe set the wedge on the marble and bowed deeply. "Terribly sorry." Quentin's stern expression melted into curiosity. "Tell me, my dear, what did you hear in its blue swirls?" Blythe swallowed. "A storm, but gentle, like apology in the clouds. It gave me the final motive for my lullaby." Quentin removed his spectacles, cleaning them on his waistcoat. "A lullaby?" Coralie fetched 3 crystal cordial glasses and poured a thimble of her rare lavender and saffron shrub. She handed one to Blythe. "To new notes," she toasted. Mabel sidled up, biscuit tin depleted, and whispered to Hazel, "Story is ingredient. Do you suppose they mean a literal story? Like, we need to tell a tale to finish the flavour?" Hazel's face lit. "Or read one. Miss Thorne!" She darted out the door towards the bookstore. 2nd chapter. Quentin, overhearing, tapped the tasting board. "Right, we shall convene a council of cheese and story." He pointed at Merrin. "Fetch your cloak-law. At Fenwick, and you, Sir Cobbler, bring a boot or tail with thunder in it." Fenwick cracked the faintest smile. "Boots? I've one pair that knows rainfall meter." Coralie clapped her flour-dusted hands. "We'll host an impromptu soiree. Stories, storms, and cheese. Tonight, 7 sharp, after the shop closes." Merrin grinned, cloak shimmering. Tales by candlelight, with pickled secrets on the side. Perfect. Evening quickened. Hazel returned with Miss Thorne, who lugged an armful of slim volumes that hum when it rains. Mabel sprinted home to bake an emergency batch of rosemary seed cake. Fenwick disappeared to heel and hide, promising to bring the boots with thunder in their soles. By 6:30, Curds and Quill was transformed. Tables were cleared, candles lit inside empty pickle jars, glowing softly as amber. The mysterious wheel rested at the centre, now sliced into star-shaped portions. Quentin prepared a fresh parchment for spontaneous poetry. Coralie arranged bowls of preserved lemon, spiced fig, and honeyed walnuts. Just before 7, the door opened, and in drifted a hush as the stranger from earlier, the violinist, stepped inside, cloak drying from rain. She carried a small, leather-bound journal. Coralie greeted her like an unexpected guest. "You found your way?" The woman smiled. "Where cheese leads, I follow." She produced the parchment slice Quentin had gifted. "Your words invited me back." Quentin's eyes glimmered. Then let the mystery bite become a symphony. At 7 o'clock sharp, the brass bell tinkled its gentlest note, as though Curds and Quill itself had taken a deep breath. Quentin turned the door sign to "Closed but listening" and dimmed the sconces until candle flame reigned. Guests gathered in a half circle. Merrin Hemslow, her indigo cloak now shimmering with silver runes. Fenwick Tole, carrying a pair of scuffed leather boots that crackled faintly when he set them down. Mabel Thistle, balancing a platter of still warm rosemary seed cake. Hazel and Tansy from Nettle and Nib, baskets of apple slices and whispering carrot sticks in tow. Miss Thorne, cradling 3 slim books that hummed like distant cellos. Blithe Larkspur, clutching her violin. And lastly, the nameless violinist, midnight cloak, silver-streaked hair, storm-grey eyes, standing by the glowing wedge of blue. Coralie welcomed them with steaming cups of mulled pear cider. "Tonight," she said softly, "we unravel story from rind." Quentin clapped his hands. "First order, identify the cheese. We know blue cultures, honeyed walnut, and nightshade blossom. The final flavour, however, eludes, declaring only story." Miss Thorne adjusted her spectacles. "A story may be tasted when spoken aloud," she mused. "Ink on the tongue, words in the palate." Merrin flicked her coke. Moon-embroidered symbols shifted into place. "My stitches record tales. Perhaps if we read them." Fenwick cleared his throat. "Boot rhythm first," he offered. He slipped the thunder boots onto Blythe's feet. They were far too large, yet when she stood, they fit perfectly, as dreams sometimes do. She walked a slow circle. Each step produced a soft, rolling rumble, like distant thunder under floorboards. Somewhere in the cheese wheel, a blue vein pulsed brighter. Merrin spread her cloak across the marble counter, silver runes blazing under candlelight. Guests leaned in. The stitched symbols rearranged into a map, one that stretched from Widdersham's clock tower to the woodland storywalk path and ended at a riverside oak. "Tales root," Hazel whispered, "begun this spring during the storywalk." Merrin nodded, amazed. The cloak remembers journeys. The violinist finally spoke. "A journey begun by music and thunder, a cheese ripened in moonlit caves, wrapped in song, delivered to those who'd finish its tale." "Which is?" Quentin asked. "The flavour of second chances," she replied. Tansy raised an eyebrow. "Tastes nutty." Exactly, Quentin chirped in. Miss Thorne opened the first of her humming books. The pages were blank until candle glow revealed watermarks forming words. Storm Violet Sonata, Movement 3. Play me where bread cools and secrets rise. Blythe's eyes widened. That's my unfinished lullaby. The violinist rested a gentle hand on Blythe's shoulder. Finish it here, now. The cheese will answer. Blythe lifted her violin. The boots rumbled softly beneath her. Merrin's cloak shimmered like spilled moonlight. Quentin placed a fresh cube of the glowing blue onto every guest's plate. Blythe began to play. The melody was slow, like raindrops learning to fall, building into a gentle thunder of strings and heartbeats. As she reached the unresolved chord, the one she could never finish, the violinist stepped forward and drew her bow across Blythe's strings in perfect harmony. The notes merged, lightning sweet, walnut warm, nightshade dusk, and something else, something that felt like the hush after reading the last page of a favourite book. The cheese wheel hummed audibly, its rind glowing steady blue. Coralie cut a slice and tasted. Her eyes glistened. Lavender memory, rosemary courage, and, oh, rain-kissed parchment. Quentin scribbled furiously, pen scratching out a new poem. Blue echoes twilight, walnut binds the wandering song, nightshade mends the moon. He set down the quill. The final ingredient is unfinished music, or, said plainly, a story yearning to resolve. Merrin laughed, the sound like wind through satin. So, the wheel needed Blythe's last chord. Blythe lowered her violin, cheeks flushed with disbelief and joy. Then the cheese is complete. Coralie sliced generous portions for everyone, pairing them with Mabel's seal cake and Hazel's apple slivers. The taste was extraordinary, sweetness balanced with a shy sigh of thunder, the warmth of a memory found. Fenwick removed the boots from Blythe's feet and set them by the fire. The rumble faded, replaced by the gentle hush of candle crackle. The violinist bowed to Blythe. Thank you for finishing what I began. Blythe blinked. You wrote the sonata? A fragment, the woman corrected. That cheese wheel needed a composer's heart. Now, she looked around, eyes glimmering. It belongs to Widdersham. Quentin presented her with a traditional prize, a parchment slice of poetry and any cheese she wished. She chose a sliver of elderflower Havarti for a journey home. She murmured and slipped out into the rain before anyone could stop her. Though Merrin could have sworn the violet blossom on the floor twisted itself into a heart as she passed. With the storm easing and lamplight pooling on wet cobbles, the company lingered. Mabel boxed the remaining biscuits for Quentin. For breakfast, not midnight snacking. Hazel passed lucky pairs around like party favours. Tansy jotted one last produce poem on the chalkboard. Thunder in the rind, lullaby upon the tongue. Friday tastes of hope. Miss Thorne, humming book under her arm, gently offered Blythe a slim volume titled Songs of Returning. She promised to read it beneath the clock tower. Fenwick placed the thunderboots back in his satchel. They were silent now. Some stories end quietly, he said. Merrin draped her cloak, now calm and dark, over Blythe's shoulders. For the walk home. Cloaks remember warmth, she said. Quentin locked the shop door, heart full. We'll call this the Friday of finishing, he declared. Coralie snuffed the final candle and whispered, or perhaps the Friday of beginnings. Outside, the street lamp flickered. As friends parted ways, each carried a piece of the tale, a tune, a poem, a taste of blue moon. And, high above, the ever-ticking clock tower clicked to midnight, sounding, some said, a half-beat lighter than before. Sunlight pressed through lace curtains and pooled on Curds and Quill's shop front, turning last night's rain into sparkles on the window glass. Quentin arrived early, bow tie freshly starched, expecting nothing more than the pleasant scent of cooling cheese. Instead, he found a parcel waiting on the doorstep, a small wooden box carved with clefts and violets. Inside lay a single slice of the moon-blue cheese, wrapped in wax and tied with silver thread. Underneath rested a note in elegant hand. For the town that finishes stories, E.W. Quentin's moustache twitched. E.W., he murmured. Emily? Elowen? Every whisper? He pocketed the box, deciding some initials were best left intriguing. Across the square, Mabel Thistle discovered that her leftover rosemary seed cakes had begun to hum. Very softly, just the lullaby Blythe completed the night before. She set them in the bakery window. Customers stopped, smiled, bought far more scones than usual, and left in unexpectedly nostalgic moods. Mabel scribbled a chalkboard sign. Today's special. Song cakes may remind you of something worth remembering. At Heel and Hide, Fenwick placed the thunderboots on a shelf beside drawings from children long grown. The boots no longer rumbled. Instead, they released a faint sigh each time he passed, like leather content after a long walk. He nodded once. Boots understood gratitude and returned to stitching a tiny pair of violet-embroidered slippers for a baby not yet born. Merrin Hemslow swept Tansy Nettle's shop for spare fabric scraps. When she shook out her indigo cloak, a single storm violet petal fluttered onto Tansy's counter and split into threads of silver. Tansy took the threads into a jar labelled Futures to Brew. Next year's compost tea, she declared, grows confidence. That evening, townsfolk gathered by the ever-ticking clock tower for Blythe Larkspur's open-air recital. She wore Merrin's cloak like a promise, and when her bow struck string, the melody carried echoes of thunder, violets, walnuts, and blue moonlight. Listeners swore they could taste nightshade blossom on the air. Dangerous, yes, but beautiful when balanced with kindness. At the final note, the clock tower ticked on. Steady, satisfied. Back in the deli, Coralie set the mysterious wooden box on the serving suggestion shelf with a new label. Moon Blue Lullaby. Best savoured after finishing something you once feared was impossible. Quentin framed the parchment poem he had written in the stranger's honour. Cheese of dusk and lyric blue, honeyed walnut, blossom true, story heard and story fed, brings the wanderer home to bread. He hung it above the door so that everyone leaving the shop would pass beneath words reminding them that flavour and life are richest when shared. Late that night, when Widdersham's lamps burned low and only the cobblestones whispered, Quentin noticed a faint glow behind the wood display case. Curious, he unlocked it. The last sliver of moon blue cheese, untasted, humming softly, was gone. In its place sat a violet blossom and a tiny folded square of parchment that read, "Taste lingers, stories wander. See you next Friday." Quentin smiled into the quiet shop. With gentle fingers, he slipped the violet between the pages of his ledger and extinguished the lamp. Outside, cobbles murmured approvingly. Somewhere in the distance, a violin sang a single E-flat beneath a sky as clear as possibility. And in Widdersham, the town that finishes stories, Friday had gone a bit blue and left everyone tasting wonder.